As promised, I'm going to record probably at least 2 to 3 videos of editing these images that we took. And this is the first one that I tried to work on. That was the Froggy pose, and my computer was not cooperating. So I'm going to go ahead and edit it now. And as I showed you, just going over these again, of course, changing the temperature if you need to, the tint, exposure through the blacks. We already fixed all that. Making sure you fix the lens correction, and then the details with the sharpening and the noise reduction. So once you've done all that, you just open up the image. And like I had said, I like the bottom part of this picture better. So I'm going to take the top half of this. So I'm using my marquee tool, and I'm pretty much grabbing all the way down to like her wrist area. And I'm copying, and I'm pretty much going to paste it over here. And I'm going to try to get it as much in place as possible. Now, granted, I'm only really taking a very small portion. This is really the only part I'm taking from, so I really don't have to make sure a lot of this lines up. I really could line up this part right here and delete the rest. Which in this case, that's probably what I'll do. So I'm going to, I press the Alt and the mask tool down here, and it automatically adds a black mask. And then I go in and I grab my brush, and I just quickly edit these out. Back up to 100%. And then I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. Okay, so pretty much got my hand out of there, so I'm going to flatten it. And then create a duplicate layer. And then I'm going to go get rid of this right quick. So I'm going to use my stamp tool and just quickly kind of fill this in a little bit. You don't have to be perfect with it because it's kind of blurry, so you really can't see it anyway. That should be good enough for now. Okay, so now we're kind of starting with the fresh image. She is off center, so the first thing I'm going to do is center her. That's composition wise. Like I said, I create a duplicate layer, and I'm basically pulling it out. She's sitting a little high up in my rule of thirds, so I kind of want her more centered. She looks pretty centered there. Now, things that I look for are the knees lined up, this foot sticking out a lot more than this one is, which is not a huge deal. Straighten out these little lumps right here. Plump her face out, fix her wrists. So just little tiny details. Fix a little bit of this. So the first thing I'm going to do is go into liquefy. But before I do that, because I moved the duplicate image to resize it and center it, I'm going to flatten it and then create another duplicate layer. I always work on a duplicate layer just because if something happens and I mess up and I want to start over, I can. I'm very anal about things being symmetrical and round. So if I feel like, baby's head is not perfectly round, which oftentimes they're not, trauma and birth can, misshapen their heads, that. So I'm seeing like her face seems a little lopsided, just ever so slightly. I'm going to pull her little cheeks out just a tiny bit. Undo that. Now sometimes they're pressing their little fingers on their face a little bit too much, and I can pull that out so it doesn't look like they're indenting their faces. So that is something that I look for. Also, I'm noticing that her eye is a little droopy. And all my shortcuts, I'm using Control and Alt to make my brush bigger and smaller. And then if I go up and down, I make it hard and soft. And this, when you're in the liquefy, it changes the pressure. Okay, so to address her knee, not that huge of a deal. It's not like an end-all be-all for me, because you don't really even notice it. Then the next thing I should always be looking for is this straight line right here between their nose, their lips, and their wrists. So that little part of the wrist right here should be literally in the middle of her chin, and it's not. Those are just those tiny little details you're going to be looking for when you're doing this pose. And not to say that every one of them has to be perfect. Some people like imperfections, and that's okay. I'm totally okay with that. Just for myself and my work, I'm just a hardcore perfectionist. It's probably the reason why some of my images take forever to edit. But this overall looks good as far as fixing all the little tiny things. Okay, so you're just going to see how fixing those tiny little things kind of made a little bit of difference, made her fill out a little bit. The next thing I'm going to do is go in here with my spot healing brush, or in this case, this is the, what is this, pouch tool? Yeah, pouch tool. I never can remember which one's which. And I'm just going to get rid of some of these lines that are in that backdrop that I probably should have ironed it before I did this, but it's just as easy to take it out and post. Let's see if I can get rid of that shadow without it messing up. When you get closer to the patterns down here, it makes a little bit of a difference because you're dealing with the pattern of the fabric, so you have to be super careful. It can be noticeable. Okay, so we've done everything we need to do. I'm going to flatten this, and then I'm going to run the actions that I personally use myself. I'm a big advocate for frequency separation. And what frequency separation does is it creates two layers. One's called a low frequency layer, where it creates this blurry layer. And then it creates a secondary layer that's called the high frequency. So it's like super crispy, overly sharp. And then when you put them together and you change the blending modes and whatnot, because I think the blending mode for the high frequency is linear light, and then the low frequency layer is normal. And then putting them together, then it looks fine. And there is a free download for the frequency separation. If you go to Flern.com, they should have a free one. If not, I can send it to you. It's very simple to create, and then I just created an action for it. So super, super simple. But what it does is on the low frequency layer is where you smooth out tones in the skin. So just to make it look a little less tonal. So like right in here, there's a little bit of shadows, and then there's some marbling in her skin here. And basically I use the lasso tool, and I will go to Gaussian blur, and I usually don't go anything higher than about 30. That's my highest peak is at 30 for my Gaussian blur. And then I'll go on the cheeks. Try not to grab any shadows. A little bit on the nose. Gaussian blur again. I will do it on the arms. And then pretty much done. Then on the high frequency layer is where you get rid of the imperfections. So I'm going back to the patch tool, and I'm just getting rid of all these little places on her skin. I'm just swiping them out really quick. It's super quick, super easy. I guess anything here we need to worry about. Nope. Okay, once you've done that, you're good to go. No more frequency separation. Now, this is getting super, super nitpicky, but I see a little bit of tonal here. So I can go back to the Gaussian blur. Oh, wrong layer. Sorry. You should always be on the low frequency layer to do this. And I can jack it up even higher, and it just kind of gets rid of a little bit of that tone. Oh, I realized what I was doing. Gotta make sure I'm using the lasso tool on the patch. So you can see there's a before and after. Okay, I'm going to finish this up really quick. So this is my, I created a series of actions that all play when I hit it. So it plays like 5 or 6 different actions. And some of these I pulled apart from actions that I got. So take for instance, this one down here is using portraiture, which I highly recommend you invest in. These right here are all from a person that I like some of the actions, but I don't use them all, and I just pulled out the ones that I do use. So they all serve a purpose. Some of these I don't use. I probably should go and fix my actions so they don't even come up because I don't really use them. But I do use portraiture. I do use Red Be Gone, which we're going to use right now. I do use the Lighten Me, levels and curves I created on my own, and then this Rosy Cheeks basically just creates a little bit of pink on their cheeks, and then this Cut the Jaundice is if they are, of course, jaundice, so they've got yellow in their skin, and then this is kind of my final step where I create kind of a peachy, bright glow on them. So I'm just going to quickly go through this very quick. So I always do portraiture first. Oftentimes, once I've done frequency separation, I don't need to run this because it kind of makes them look a little plasticky, but it's mainly if they've got some marbling in their skin, if they were pulled, it just kind of gets rid of the final look. So, and then I turn it down to like 50%, which still leaves some texture in their skin. Next, I use Red Be Gone, always at 25% opacity, 25% flow. Usually their eyes and nose, a little bit on their hands. Toes. And this video is fixing to cut off, so I'll just record a part 2 to it. And then I go up to levels, and anytime there's this gap right here, that means